All right. You ready to go, Chief?
I'm ready.
All right. So, good afternoon. My name is Stephen Bundy. I'm a peer support specialist here at the Department of Veterans Affairs at the Pueblo VA Clinic. I'm here today with CW4 Chief Dennis McBrayer, and I'm going to be giving him an interview today. Chief, I'm glad you're here.
So am I.
All
Thank you
right.
for letting me be here.
Absolutely. So this is a really cool program, and I'm going to try to gather a lot of information from you today.
Certainly.
So, very first thing, before I get into any other details, Chief, could you tell me why you wanted to do this interview?
Well, when I saw the flyer and looked into it, at first I thought it'd be a good opportunity to share with other veterans and maybe a platform for sharing with my family and friends that I've never been able to do before. The reason that I ended up being here is for myself, because I've never been given a chance in my entire life to be able to share my experiences with another person or with my family and friends. So I think it's important for me to give this out, and whoever should be able to see it and get something for it, that's even better.
That's amazing. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. I'm really kind of taking this program to heart, and what you're doing right now is important for our future generations and all, and for yourself.
I see that.
So I'm going to jump in here at the beginning, and I want to know about where you grew up, your childhood. Could you tell me about where you were born, where you grew up, and your early education?
Okay, I was born in Texas, Midland, Texas, to a oil field family. We moved around quite a bit from Oklahoma, Texas, all the way to California back. It was kind of like the family of Grape Rafts. My family followed each other around there. And I went through 12 different schools during my growing up time there, and eventually graduated in California on that.
Okay. What school did you go to in Cali?
In California, I went to Westminster High School.
Westminster High School.
In Orange County.
Orange County, okay.
Yeah.
I've never been, but it sounds like it would be a cool place to be.
It was a fun time to grow up there.
Surfing, skateboarding?
Well, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
Cool. Chief, tell me about your early days of service. So, did you enlist? Were you drafted? How'd you end up in the military? You were in the Army, yes?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. And what did you do in the Army?
Well, in the Army, I joined at the age of 18 with the specific reason of flying helicopters. I joined the aviation portion of the Army.
Okay.
At that time, the Vietnam War was going, and it was going pretty heavy during the 71, 72 time frame that I was in Vietnam. And I recall that my father took me on a helicopter ride at the age of 6. And I remember saying that I would like to do this. So my lotto number was approximately 150 because we were drafting at that time. And instead of getting drafted and possibly being on the ground and doing things I didn't want to do, I enlisted specifically for the helicopter program.
Okay, right on. And where'd you train for that?
Well, at first I started my training in Fort Walters, Texas. We did the primary training. I believe it was approximately 4 months there. And then we transferred to Fort Rucker, Alabama, where we trained for the advanced helicopters and tactics.
All right. So you're helicopter pilots. You're all warrants. So how did your schooling go? Did you go direct? I mean, you went directly to aviation. Did you go to warrant school immediately?
Yes, I was right out of high school, and I went directly to the warrant officer program on it. And initially, they train you to be a warrant officer, and then they put in the flying abilities out there. And during the training, we flew, I think, 4 different types of helicopters.
Okay.
They train you in just basics to get there, which reminds me of another story. We did instruments, we did tactical training, we did many different things. I do recall that my first helicopter ride, after we did 1 month of what we call ground school indoctrination, and that was to get rid of the people that really didn't want to be there. My first helicopter ride, we took off. My instructor says, "Okay, Dennis, I want you to take the controls and just take it easy." And I said, "Okay." And I did. Of course, I was wobbling back and forth. And all of a sudden, I didn't hear any engine noise. He says, "I have the helicopter." And he took the controls. I said, you have it. And we started going down. And I thought, well, look at this. He's showing me an auto rotation, a maneuver that we learned to land the helicopter. And you get down there, then you took the power back on and you keep on going. He didn't do that. He kept going all the way to the ground. And it's at the time about to hit the ground that I realized our engine had quit. We actually had an engine failure on my first flight. I remember we landed safely in the field. He got out, lit a cigarette, and was shaking.
Oh my goodness.
Then I realized how serious it was. But after that, it was kind of like there's a movie called ARP. I think ARP, it was what it is. It says, I'm not going to crash anymore because I've already had mine out of the way. And believe it or not, I never did.
There you go.
Yeah,
Right on. Get it knocked out in training.
exactly.
I had my incident in jump school.
Ah.
So, yeah. Okay, Chief. Well, thank you for explaining that. So, tell me about, I know you served in wartime, yes?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Tell me about your wartime service. Where'd you travel and for how long?
Well, it was in Vietnam. That was my first tour of duty. That was in 71 to 72. I did have a break in service for a short period of time right after Vietnam. I rejoined, and they apparently put too many people out. And then I went to Desert Storm 20 years later. So that was my wartime service. In Desert Storm in Vietnam, I spent time in Vietnam. We did several trips into Laos and Cambodia. And then Desert Storm, we staged out of Saudi Arabia. Of course, we went into Iraq and spent a lot of time in Kuwait at the end of the war.
Okay. All right. And what were your primary assignments and responsibilities while you were there?
Well, in Vietnam, the primary responsibility was moving supplies to and from different fire bases being those places where they have artillery to be able to shoot and just supplying the people there. Moving people around, we did a lot of troop insertions with multiple helicopters. We did a lot of extractions, taking troops out. We actually did a lot of moving around villages from one area to another. I recall one time that my mission was to move some villagers from one area to another, and we pulled up there, and I was expecting a family to come out. And I did. I saw a family coming out, and behind them was coming an older man, and he had several crates of chickens over his shoulder. He had ducks, and behind him was a young man having two goats, and behind him, I guess it was probably his son, that had a big pig. So we had 8 people on there, maybe a half a dozen chickens, ducks, a couple of goats, and a pig. And that's what we moved at one time.
Did you have to put them on the manifest?
I did not. I was a little concerned because he wanted to move a water buffalo, but we didn't have room.
Oh, no. Nope. Chief, what is your most vivid or fond memory of your time in service that you'll never forget?
I can't recall a lot of what I would call fond memories, but the vivid memories are exactly that, vivid. In Vietnam, the first vivid one that I have was my first flight in Vietnam. When you get there, we spend a week getting shots, clothing, assignments. And then I went to my unit. There, they have to check you out as a pilot, see if you really indeed know how to fly. So we got at that time I flew UH-1 Hueys, helicopters. And we have a crew of 4, the pilot, the co-pilot, a door gunner, and a crew chief. And both the door gunner and crew chief have M60 machine guns on the side. When we landed there, we took the crew chief and the gunner took their machine guns off and went over and set them down. And then the pilot in command, and I was the co-pilot, took me around the traffic pattern several times. It was just to show me if I knew how to fly, emergency procedures, quick stops, many things that we learned in flight school. Then we landed, put the guns back on, and we went off on our first mission. And that was a hilltop not too far from that. And this area here, by the way, was in the 173rd Airborne Brigade area, and I was flying with what they call the Casper platoon. And we moved on the mountaintop, and they loaded one person on board, and he was a deceased ranger. His Special Forces Ranger. And I remember coming off the hill, my pilot flew, and I looked back and they had covered him up, but the cover had come off. And I saw this man that was no much older than I was, and it dawned on me that this is really serious, that actually I wondered if his family was going to be okay with him being gone. Just a little bit of moment of sympathy for this. And that was my first experience in Vietnam, my first flight in Vietnam.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that stands out.
That one stands out. That one stands out a lot.
Anything else you wanted to share?
Well, there was other things that went on to Vietnam that maybe I'll share during the interview. I do remember Desert Storm, a couple of incidences that have to do with times that happened. We were on a area parked, and at that time I flew Chinooks out of Fort Carson, the 4th Infantry Brigade.
Okay.
And we assigned to the 12th Airborne Division. And we were parked out there and we were sleeping in our Chinooks. We had a crew of 5, and I was the pilot in command at that time. And we had the air raid sirens go off. Now, we was close enough to one of the cities there to hear this, and the air raid sirens went off. And the Scuds were coming in.
That's what I was going to say.
Scuds missiles, yes. Mm-hmm. So we put in what we call the MOP gear, our anti-radiation gas equipment that we were issued, and our gas mask and all this sort of, and we waited. And I heard things hitting the top of the helicopter outside, and come out to find out later that part of the rocket had been blown up and parts had fallen around us.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't actually hit us, but I remember that. And I remember the difference between that and Vietnam. And I think we'll talk about the differences a little bit. But this one, in Vietnam, I was young and mortal and not afraid. I don't recall having any fear. In Desert Storm, I was 20 years older. I was mortal, and I found fear. And that was one of 2 occasions that happened where I was afraid on it. And I had to do some serious soul searching during that time to come to terms with that, but I eventually did. It was something that was normal, and it was okay for me at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm starting to really kind of grasp the thought, because I'm older now. Mm-hmm. When I went to Iraq was 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's 20 years ago this year, actually. I think if I were to have that break in service, mm-hmm. I'd be looking at things way different today than I did when I went in 2003. You're right. I was feeling young and invincible, and it was in Afghanistan in 2010-11 that I realized that I wasn't. But I'm a different person today, so I'm sure that had to be a huge challenge. So while we're on this, mm-hmm. would you be willing to kind of break down and explain the difference between your service in Vietnam, Desert Storm, and that 20-year gap?
Well, in Vietnam, like I said, I was immortal. I wasn't going to die. That was going to happen to the other person. Of course, that first flight gave me a little bit of insight to that. In Vietnam, you could see who was shooting at you. You knew where the enemy was shooting from. You sometimes didn't know who they were, but you could see the bullets coming at you, and you're able to move about. You went into areas that you did not know were safe or not on it, and you had to be prepared for that. The enemy was unknown at that time. You didn't know who it was on that. Desert Storm, and I will back up, Vietnam was not a popular war on it. A lot of people did not support it. And just the opposite, the Desert Storm, people supported it. They thought we were doing something right on that. So
there was a change in even the political environment?
When I was going to Vietnam, I didn't go with a political agenda. Or is this a right war? Is this an incorrect or politically incorrect war? And it wasn't until much longer that I changed my view on that. But at that time, there's only one reason I wanted to go. How would I react in a wartime situation? It was a personal thing for me on that.
Okay.
And Desert Storm was a little bit different. I didn't have to prove anything. Desert Storm was unique in the fact that we did a lot of transportations in the Chinooks. We didn't do a lot of combat things on that. And there was some more entertaining things that happened there on it.
Mm-hmm.
But Desert Storm in Vietnam, we came back and entered the war, went to the airport, got out, and that was it. And the families didn't know what to do with us. They didn't know what the questions asked. They expected us to get back to work to support the family.
Mm-hmm.
And we were still grappling with that wartime mentality instead of let's get back and find a job and support the family. In Desert Storm, and this was actually quite healing for me. When we came back, we got off the plane at Kennedy Airport. And when we got off, there was people actually standing along the aisle as we come off that plane. They obviously heard we were coming back. And they had signs saying, "Welcome home, welcome home." And they were clapping and cheering. And for me, that was a healing process. I was fortunate to be able to have that. And then I was able to stay in the service to continue that healing process. So Desert Storm was a healing process for me in that aspect. And unfortunately, a lot of my people that I know and my friends and others didn't have that opportunity. And in Desert Storm, we had 3 pilots that were Vietnam vets in our company of
Okay.
200 on it. And the younger pilots got me one time together and says, "Dennis," says, "we would like you to be at the back of our formation. Let us lead." And I had to ask them why, and they says, "Well, we know your experience. We know that if we go down, you're going to come in and you're going to pick us up."
Mm.
And that was a humbling experience for me on that. So I was always the trail ship.
Shows a lot of respect, though.
Yeah, it did. It
Mm-hmm.
did, and it put a lot of responsibility that I was willing to shoulder. Let's not even call it shoulder. It was a responsibility I willingly undertook for these young pilots. And fortunately, I didn't have to go down for anybody and pick them up.
Good.
So,
Good. So what rank were you in Desert Storm?
Desert Storm, I got promoted to CW3, Chief Warrant Officer 3 at
Okay.
that time.
Mm-hmm.
They actually pinned me out there just before the war started.
Okay.
On it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was in Saudi?
That was in Saudi.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
My father went to Saudi as well.
Oh.
So anything during your service that was particularly funny that you would be willing to share?
Well, I like the thing of the animals and the pig. There was one time in Vietnam that we like to fly either very high to avoid small arms fire, or very low so they can't see us.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one day that I got very low across rice paddies. In Vietnam, they had a lot of square fields, rice paddies, stalks of rice coming up maybe 6 inches out of the water. And they had 2-foot dikes around those. So I had fun going over the dikes, and just before I get to it, pop up and drop back down across the rice paddies. And I did this all the way back home. And when I shut down the helicopter, I was still sitting in my seat, and my crew chief, and that was his helicopter, come over there and slap me on the side of the helmet. And I says, "What's the problem?" Says, his words were exactly, "Get your ass out here and look." So I went over there and looked, and the helicopters, the Hueys, have, of course, skids. And under those things, they got what they call skid shoes, which line the skids. So when we land and we scratch them up, we just change them out. Well, he showed me real closely. He put my head down there, and under the skid shoes was piles and piles of rice on it. And he got very angry at me. So I had to help him clean the skid shoes of that rice. And it was rather entertaining.
You were testing the maximum limits of your
Yeah,
vehicle.
well, it was rather foolish. But then again, I was young and it
Mhm.
seemed like the fun thing to do.
What was your favorite bird to fly?
You know, I enjoyed both. I enjoyed the versatility of the UH-1, the Huey in Vietnam, and all the things that we did, and I was able to do it. And in Vietnam, I was a good pilot. I was a good pilot. I thought so, and my crew chiefs thought so. In Chinooks, it's an entirely different animal, different
Mhm.
beast, and I really enjoyed the Chinooks, but it's an entirely different way to fly on that. And I was stationed in, I think, 4 different Chinook units on there, so I got a variety of flying experience. I will take another humorous thing. I was stationed in Germany, and I went to a mission over into England. And on the way back, I decided, well, let's have some fun. So I went down the Thames River in London, about 100 feet off. And if you've ever heard of Chinook, they're very loud.
Yeah.
And I went up and popped over the bridges at the time, the Tower Bridges, the thing.
No.
And I found out a little later that there was an air restriction in that area, that you weren't supposed to be under 1,000 feet. And the Prime Minister's office gave my company commander a call. Says, I need to talk to that pilot that was buzzing
Ooh.
Thames River. My commander laughed about it, says, probably shouldn't do that again. I says, I won't.
I'm surprised that they didn't try to recruit you. Like,
Yeah.
wow, did you see what that pilot did? That's our guy. Awesome. Thank you, Chief. I really appreciate that. And what was the best part of your service?
You know, the best part of my service was the camaraderie, the doing things with the people that, well, I'm sure you even know this, the camaraderie that you build over time when you do different things together, the dependability, depending on the other person in your life. That was enjoyable. I also enjoyed the many different assignments. I was assigned in Germany, Hawaii, Italy. I've been to Korea, Vietnam, the Desert Storm, many other places, and I enjoyed that movement, and I enjoyed meeting the different people and doing different things, and those were enjoyable times.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk a couple things. So what were your awards and citations? I know you had one that you wanted to share.
I'll share one. I've had I say the normal rewards.
You
You
want me to
know,
grab it?
uh, that's not necessary.
Okay.
I can see it. I know what it is. I had the normal awards, air medals for, and they get all these other meritorious service and ARCOMs and Army achievements. But the one that I'm most proud of, well, is actually two. I got an Air Force Achievement Medal from the Air Force for something that I did when I was assigned to Fort Carson. Uh, I was put in for a Valor Award, and I was giving award in New York by the American Legion's Aviators Post, the only one in the United States. They recognized pilots that went beyond what they consider their normal flying abilities in the Army, the Navy, Marines, and Coast Guard, and I was chosen that year for the Army. I was chosen because there was an Air Force cadet that had fallen off a cliff 90 feet or 100 feet and was very serious condition behind the Air Force Academy. They had a smaller Huey that tried to get there, but they couldn't because of the winds. And so I took my Chinook out as a pilot in command. We took a flight surgeon on there and a medical team, and was able to get him up by winching up through that mountainside up against a cliff. And they started working on him inside. There was other people on the ground, so I tried to get them up. But after we got the first one up, the flight surgeon told us that we're losing him. We need to get him out of there into a hospital. So we flew back toward Colorado Springs. I was not aware where the hospital was. And one of my crew chiefs got up there and says, head that direction. And when I told them, it says, I need some guidance down there, they lined the helipad with ambulances and turned on their lights. And I found it because it was just about dusk, just about the sundown. And I landed over there. They rushed him off. The medical team rushed him off on that. And and he made it. He lived. What was important to me in that story, that what was so special about that time, is that his father called me, and he said he wanted to thank me for saving his son's life on that, and that was special. 7 months later, he called me again. He says, "Today's my son's birthday, and he's here because of you and what your people did." I never met the young man. I never saw him, but the voice and the thanks that I got from the father was well worth it. And they gave me a reward for it. And I went to New York, and that was quite a trip too. And it was that's the most special award that I've gotten out
I'm
of the
willing.
military.
I'm willing to bet. And I'm willing to bet just the piece hearing it from the father was probably more important than the medal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. Man, that's awesome story. Thanks for sharing that, Chief.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
absolutely. You said you had another?
No, I don't recall another
Okay.
one.
All right. That's okay. Well, thank you for that.
Okay.
So after you got out of the military, and when did your career end?
In 1998, I retired.
98.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. And what did you end up doing after you got out? What did you do for a living? What was your occupation?
Well, pretty much right after I got out, I signed on as a part-time park ranger at Lake Pueblo Reservoir here in Colorado. It was just a summer job, and it was enjoyable. It wasn't very hard, but I enjoyed it a lot. I got my degree, which I hadn't had until that time, and then I applied to become full-time, and I became a full-time park ranger for the state of Colorado, and I was at Lake Pueblo for several years.
And did you retire from that?
I did. It was a short career.
Okay.
I retired. It was time to move on.
Okay.
And the other thing that I did there, which was to me was more gratifying, is I was a foster parent at that time. Me and my present wife at that time had something like 26 foster children in our care. Most of them were at-risk youth. I think probably my military training had a lot to do with the discipline and being able to take care of that situation.
Handling 25.
Yes, and I had some very interesting stories about that. But those two were combined at the time, and that's kept me pretty busy. Yeah.
Right on. What are you doing today?
Today, I am again retired. I live in Mexico. I spend 8 months down there, and then I come back about 3 months during the summer to avoid the humidity and the monsoons down there. And I just keep busy traveling now is pretty much what I do.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. You deserve it. Do you have any hobbies?
I don't know if I have hobbies other than maybe things that I enjoy doing. I enjoy playing board games with my friends and family. I do Zumba. I've been doing that for years, and that's one of my enjoyments. I like the dancing part of it.
Cool.
I picked up pickleball this year, so I'm going to do that because I like to be competitive and active. 2 years ago, I did something that I've always wanted to do. I started canvas painting canvases and making different forms of art outside of the canvas. And I'm going to get involved in that one. And it's fun.
What's your favorite medium?
Right now, I've been working in acrylics.
I like acrylic too.
But I actually did a little 3D thing with dominoes on it. And that turned out pretty nice.
Cool.
I enjoyed that.
Right on. I'd like to see your artwork sometime. I really would, because I paint as well, and so I'm into the whole deal.
It is relaxing.
It is.
Yeah.
So as a matter of fact, just real quick, I don't want to jump into your story,
No.
but when we were last year during the Stanley Cup playoffs, I'm a huge Colorado Avalanche fan, and my wife was like, "Oh, it's your fault we lost," because I sat there painting the whole game and I actually didn't watch the game, and that's like, how did I manage to do that? Like, it was only because I was so zoned out in my painting and just but we lost the game and I took the heat for it.
Well, you know how it is. It's relaxing.
Yeah.
It gives me some of my serenity.
It is. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Talk to me about out of your whole entire life. An amazing, once in a lifetime experience that's going to stick with you forever.
I looked at that one and I went over several things, but there's only one that actually stands out as extremely gratifying, and it has to do with my foster care. My last child that we had, our last child that we had, his name was Andrew, and we got a call in the night from the foster agency in the middle of the night. It says, "We have a child here. Can we bring him over?" And I said, "Of course." And I went out and met him at the car, and I had to carry him to the house. He was approximately 6 years old. I think he was 6 years old. And I had to be careful because his body was covered in cigarette burns and his malnutrition. He was crying and whimpering and even screaming sometimes. And of course, we took him in. And for 3 months, it was a daily, I'm not going to say task, it was a daily, I worked daily with him. I had to take him and give him baths. I had to be careful of the water because of his burns that he had. He would always cry. He would wet the bed at night, and the urine would cause him pain. And he went through this for several weeks. And then we reached a point where he was getting better, and he started calling me Dad. And finally came a point that he was well enough to go back, not back, go with his grandparents on that. And I had a picture of me and him sitting on the porch and saying goodbye. And he told me, "I'm going to miss you, Dad," on it. And I said goodbye to him. And I found out later that he has excellent grades. He's graduated now and he's doing very, very good.
Oh,
And that was the last foster child I had because two reasons. It was very difficult to see that child in the pain, and it's difficult for me emotionally, but it was also very gratifying to say that I was able to help one child to recover from what he had been abused on. And that was my last experience with that. But that's the most gratifying thing I've had in my life when it comes to doing something for others or working with others.
thank you for sharing that.
Well,
That's really touching. That's such a challenge. And thank you for doing that. That's amazing. So can we talk about a couple of reflections? So how did your military service and experiences affect your life?
well, they've affected me negatively and positively in many ways. The negative part of it was the coming back from a situation back into a world situation where Vietnam, people really didn't realize where we were coming from. And it caused a lot of resentments. It caused anger. Uh, in Vietnam during that time, it took a lot of things from me. I lost a lot of my empathy, my ability to love, my morality. Um, I lost many things that was difficult to get back. And all truth in the future, my future then is I lost it again a couple of times after Desert Storm on it. So I lost a lot of that. It was very difficult to get back. That patience is another one on that one. Those are the negative things on it. The positive things, it taught me discipline. It taught me boundaries. And there's just some things I was able to take into my life, into my ranger abilities and beyond in my foster care. That helped in my foster care to be able to help these children on that. And I guess that's about, I have to end it there.
That's a great takeaway, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you were able to take what you got from the military and continue it over and be able to share it with others.
Mm.
And that's pretty amazing. What are some life lessons that you learned from the military?
That one I haven't thought much about
Okay.
on it. I looked at it I think it's hard to quantify the life lessons for me because it was so many things happened in my life, and it molded who I am today, good or bad. That's who I am today. A lot of things I'm grateful for in the military. Some things I'm still a little resentful for, but not much on that one because I learned to live with that one. I am today because of my military service that molded my life at a very young age.
Hmm.
Okay. Uh, that with my family too, a little bit. But I don't think I have much to say on that
Okay.
one.
All right.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you missed about your service?
Again, I miss the camaraderie. I miss flying occasionally on that. I really miss the moving around to different locations and seeing different places in the world. And I miss that sometimes, although the traveling I'm still enjoying. So that part is okay.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. I'm sure. Well, I've I've spent some time in both of the birds that you flew.
Mm,
I've jumped out of both of them, and so I too understand the missing that pull of being out there, being up in the sky, and doing those fun things.
exactly.
Yeah. Is there anything that you're glad that you left behind in the military?
I'm glad I left the war behind. I'm glad of that one. And I've learned over life to leave a lot of the other things behind. The regrets, the anger, those aren't there anymore. That's because of other things that I've done in life,
Hmm.
which I'll share with you at the end here. But I don't have a lot of regrets in the fact that I went into the military because it is who I am. So I don't have them in that extent. So leaving things behind, for the most part, no.
Sure.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be who I am.
Yep, it made you who you are today. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So, is there anything that you wish more people, the civilians of our time, knew about and understood about veterans in our military service?
I do. I have my own philosophy on a couple of things, and I speak only for me. I can't speak for the other veterans on that. My childhood, excuse, I was raised in an alcoholic family, and while it wasn't abusive, it was fear-filled and the unexpected, and never know what's going on. And I think in a way that prepared me for Vietnam because I had the unexpected, and I didn't know if it was going to be fearful, and I actually fit quite well in that on that one. Um, but coming back from Vietnam and Desert Storm, there's two things that I wished that would have happened. One that that a family member or friend would say, Dennis, sit down with me, tell me your experiences. I want to hear. I see some of these movies and you hear about, well, they don't want to talk about it, or I didn't want to talk about it, and we're just waiting. I always wish that my family would have said, Dennis, just what's going on? Talk to me. And if I didn't, I say so and says, I'll be here when you're ready. Only two occasions did that happen. One was actually my daughter, who actually was in the military, and she sat down and talked to it. And another was a good friend by the name of Ali. We actually talked about it. But then again, they knew a little bit about where I'm coming from on that one. So if I had to say anything to family members, don't assume that they don't want to talk. For me, I wish that had come out. And I think things would have been easier. Counseling, I've had that. There's a little bit difference than talking with a family member there on it. And this is why I have this platform now. I'm actually kind of talking to my family now, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe you're hearing what I'm saying here, and maybe what I've been going through. But that's some advice I have. And listen to the veteran. Patience. Patience is a big thing. And don't assume things. There's two different worlds. The military and war is two different things from the civilian life on it. And we talk about PTSD. It's become a common word now for things that happen. And people do have PTSD for tragic things that happen in your life. And PTSD for the young Andrew who I was talking about. He had that wartime PTSD.
Mhm.
But when you're in any kind of war, and I'm talking about our Desert Storm, Iraq, or Afghanistan, and Vietnam, it's a daily thing sometimes. I can't speak for those people on the ground on that because at night I had a place to go back on that. And for me to assume that I know what they went through and the experiences and maybe even the horrors of war, I can't speak for them. But I think they probably feel the same way I do. Somebody just listen and want them to talk. That would be my advice to families.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Is there, what would you like people to know or remember from your journey?
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, and a lot of my family members I dragged along sometimes with me, and some of those experiences weren't good. Some of them were on it. Um, I have a lot of regrets in the military. Some things that didn't do, and it had to come from my past experiences in Vietnam and Desert Storm. I don't use that as an excuse on that. But because of that, I have those regrets and learn from my experience. I learn from my experiences is some people want to, but maybe some of them shouldn't on that. But, I'm going to go ahead and say, and there's something else here. At the end, you're going to ask something else I'd like to add. I'll add it now because it's an important part of my life and my military career. And I don't hesitate to talk about it. I just wanted to find a place to do it. Military taught me how to drink. War taught me how to drink on it. And I drank a lot. And being a helicopter pilot, I didn't drink every day. But when I did, I drank to excess. And sometimes I was a blackout drinker. You talk about experiences that I had. When I checked into my unit there, into Vietnam and did what I had to do, I had quit drinking because I knew that maybe I shouldn't be having a drink at all. But the day before I was going to go to my unit, my friend says, "You can drink some wine. It's okay." And I says, "Okay." Well, next morning I woke up, blacked out. I woke up in another building. I have no idea where I was. I didn't remember the night, and I missed my flight to the unit. And that was a reputation that I entered into when I got to my unit. During my career, I have flown helicopters drunk. One time, I was actually on a mission that was going to leave at 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, I drank till about 5 and decided it was time to quit. And I went out there, and I was the pilot, and my co-pilot was new, so we started the helicopter. You move it over, you sit down, you go eat. And I knew I shouldn't be driving the helicopter. So I went and talked to my operations officer. I can't do this. He says, "Dennis, we don't have anybody do it. You're going to have to drive. You're going to have to go fly that thing, drunk or not." And I did. And I got lost in Vietnam in a helicopter.
Mm.
And I was at my co-pilot didn't say anything. My crew chief, my gunner didn't say anything. I went to a briefing. I know they saw me because I could see some looks. Not one person said a thing on that one. And during my career, alcohol played a part in that. And I've done it more than a couple of times. Part of my story and I am in recovery, but part of my story is I flew a helicopter before I drove a car drunk on that. And I actually went into uh, treatment at expense of the Army while I was in Germany or while I was in Italy to there on that for recovery. But the drinking, the Vietnam, the military, or the Desert Storm and the drinking, I consolidated into a period that was not good for my relationships, for my children, for more than one wife. To this day, I still try to make amends to, including my children. But that's a sad part of the military for me. Those are the regretful parts. And I haven't had a drink in 30 years on that one. but the memories are still there. Sometimes I will remember the things about Vietnam that I shared, and at the same time, the drinking episodes will come up, and there's more than one, and that's sad on it. But that is, again, part of my life. That is who I am, and I don't really blame the military or the wars. I got to accept my own fate. I once remember going to treatment, Major Carl Smith, and I was complaining and bitching to him about how my life was terrible and my wife doesn't understand me, and nobody understands. And he told me, he says, Dennis, he says, that may be true. So what are you going to do about it? And ever since that day, I've been trying to do something about that. Not always successfully on it, not always successfully, but I had to share that. I had to share that part of it. It was part of my life.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very open and honest, and unfortunately, very common. Very common. It's kind of the nature of the beast. I don't know why, but it's just very common. Anything else that you would like to add for our future generations? I asked you my last question. We already hit the last question. So anything for future generations that you'd like to take away from this interview?
I think it's important to share our experiences, even if other than military, just to share with those that are around you and that you love and that want to hear what you have to say. Don't assume that what you've done in your life is unimportant. You know, I got to share one experience. I talked to a young man from your generation, and he was in Afghanistan. And I admire the troops in Afghanistan, the veterans, because they went through a whole different war of IEDs and not knowing who the people are, and something that I couldn't fathom. And I talked to a young man from there, and I told him that. He says, I respect that. I can't understand that. He says, you just have my admiration for that. And he knew that I was in Vietnam. He says, I can't understand how you can fly with bullets coming up through the helicopter and do this. I have admiration. So I think all of us, our veterans, are the same in many ways. I think we have mutual admiration for each generation. And I think that's important, you know. I like hearing about veterans. I like hearing about what you're talking about, Steve, when we were sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Those important to me to hear that's a camaraderie that's
Yep.
talking about that I miss. And if I had to say anything, those veterans support each other. And with the family supporting the veterans, you have a good support system. And use it. Don't say I'm too good till you not use it. Be there. And I'm here to say things do get better. It may take a while, but it does require patience, but they get better. That's all.
Awesome. Chief McBrayer, thank you so much for this interview.
You're welcome.
I'm so happy to have had you here. You've got a lot of stories. You've got a heck of a life, and you've got a lot to share with your family and others. So I really appreciate it, and I thank you being here.
Thank you for letting me do it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.